Tonight on NBC 10's Canton Confidential, a clash of memories.
At no point in time did you ever hear her say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, correct?
Correct.
You indicated in both instances that the defendant said to you, I hit him, repeatedly, correct?
Correct.
As new light is shed on dark events.
The snow was probably halfway up his rib point. Top of his body was clear.
Who, I believe at that point, said, "You're hysterical, you need to calm down."
We are breaking down the biggest moments from day 3 of testimony. Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial, starts right now.
Good evening. First responders were back on the stand today, answering questions about the morning John O'Keefe's body was found. Welcome back to Canton Confidential. I'm J.C. Monahan. Glenn Jones has the night off. Today, the prosecution called 4 witnesses. They are firefighter paramedics who responded to the scene at 34 Fairview Road in Canton on the morning of January 29, 2022. Questions from both the prosecution and defense seem to zero in on the timeline of that morning, what they saw at the crime scene, and more specifically, what they said Karen Reed said that morning. NBC 10's Kirsten Glaven live outside the Norfolk County Superior Courthouse with a look at today's testimony. Kirsten.
Well, 3 of the 5 paramedics that we've heard from so far have testified saying that they heard Karen Reed admit to hitting Officer John O'Keefe that morning, or that night rather. But still, we are hearing the defense counter that argument using video from the scene to challenge that claim. 4 Canton firefighter paramedics taking the stand on Thursday with different accounts over one key phrase. Some saying they heard Karen Reed admit on scene, quote, "I hit him," while others claim they never did.
You indicated in both instances that the defendant said to you, I hit him, repeatedly, correct?
Correct.
At no point in time did you ever hear her say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, correct?
Correct.
All I recall her saying was, is he alive?
She said, "I hit him." She repeated it.
This first responder, Katie McLaughlin, adding that a police officer also heard the alleged confession.
She repeated, "I hit him." And there was a police officer who was in that vicinity kind of with us who replied, "You what?" She repeated it one more time. And that officer then signaled to somebody, "Get Goody down here," which I'm assuming would be the sergeant.
This dash camera footage of that snowy morning on Fairview Road shown again to a jury, depicting these first responders arriving on scene and trying to resuscitate John O'Keefe's cold body before putting him into an ambulance. The defense pointing out some discrepancies.
Did you see any place in that video where you had any sort of detailed conversation with my client?
No.
Outside of court,
She didn't say I did it.
Reed's attorneys doubling down and looking forward to a viewing on Friday.
What are you hoping jurors look for tomorrow or see?
Well, I think they'll need to get out there themselves and eyeball the property and see how close everything is to everything else. And I think it's going to really assist them, and I'm glad that the judge allowed the view.
Now, during that visit tomorrow, jurors will be taken to the Waterfall Bar and Grill, along with possibly other locations tied to this case. The judge recommending that all the jurors wear sneakers because she says it's going to be a long day.
Kirsten, I think it has been for the 3 days of testimony already. Can you recap how many witnesses we've heard from so far, and more importantly, how many are left?
Yeah, it's been a long week so far, and this is just week 1. So far, we've heard from 9 witnesses, and 2 of those were family members. 7 were first responders. Just to give you kind of a look at how long this might go, there were 160 witnesses on the combined list. Some of them could be called, some of them maybe not. But either way, it looks like we have a long way to go here.
Kirsten, thank you. I know you'll be with us for the remainder of the trial, but joining me now in studio is local attorney Catherine Loftus. You may also recognize her from her TikTok because you've been posting a lot about this trial. Can you talk to me a little bit about what the intrigue is for you?
It's really interesting for me, having spent quite some time in the district attorney's office as a prosecutor, working in the grand jury as well as in the district courts, and then spending some time on the defense side. I think it's really interesting because the two theories are so disparate that they're effectively presenting two separate types of cases. And what they're doing here is the Commonwealth is presenting one theory, the defense is completely rejecting that theory and likely will be introducing evidence of a third party. So for me as a trial attorney, it's been fascinating to watch how both sides present their cases.
She's got a lot of followers on TikTok. Tell me how the reaction has been to your posts and to the trial. What are you hearing?
Sure. It's quite interesting. I get pretty good feedback. My goal, JC, really is not to persuade anybody of one side or the other. My goal is to explain the law in a straightforward way. It's a very complicated technical thing, how evidence is admitted, what people can testify to. So what I'm really trying to do is explain things as they happen, objections, hearsay, what it means. And I really get feedback from both sides. People feel very strongly one way or the other. And then there's some who are in the middle. So I think ultimately the jury is the one who decides all of this, and they are coming in with an open mind, and that's what I'm trying to get people to do.
And honestly, that's what we're trying to do here as well, because it does take some dissecting to understand this process. The people we saw on the stand today, they were witnesses for the prosecution. We just want to play a little clip from court today, because when the defense cross-examined them, it didn't seem hard to get them to contradict what they had just said. Let's take a listen just to part of Canton paramedic Anthony Flamatis' testimony this morning.
She just repeated the phrase over and over again, I hit him, I hit him.
There's an area in the report for a narrative.
Yes.
About your observations, your experiences with this patient, correct?
Correct.
Your job as a lead paramedic is to be as detailed as possible, correct?
Correct.
You want to provide and impart the most detail you possibly can about an incident to assist in medical intervention, correct?
Correct.
Can you point to that portion of your report where you indicate that my client said the words, I hit him?
It doesn't say that.
Can you point to your report, the portion of your report, where you indicate that you told the doctors and nurses that she said, I hit him?
Doesn't say that.
Can you point to that portion?
Okay, that was just one witness. So I'm hoping as a former prosecutor, you can help at least me understand a little bit about what's happening here. Because so far, I mean, these are witnesses for the prosecution. My takeaways, most memorable moments, have been from cross-examination.
Well, I think it's unfortunate that the prosecution is trying to put together a number of witnesses through both the police officers and the firefighters to establish that multiple people, as they allege, heard Karen Reed say, I hit him, in various forms, in various states of frustration, emotion. The problem with that is as you stated, some of that didn't make its way into reports. And as most attorneys will tell you, that the most important thing is to memorialize right away, because statements, when they're contemporaneously written, are inherently more reliable. The fact that they're not, many of these statements were not, in fact, put in police reports or the firefighter reports, what it does is it doesn't mean that they didn't happen, but it does allow the opening for the defense to attack them. And essentially that's what their job is to poke holes in the Commonwealth's theory, and they did an excellent job of doing that today.
I think it's sort of clear. We've talked a lot about prosecutor and the defense. There is quite a difference between the assistant district attorney, Adam Lally, from the defense attorneys, especially Alan Jackson, who we heard a lot from today. I mean, the district attorney, he's just a little quieter. He's a little more straightforward. He wants to lay things out, it appears, very strategically. As a juror, though, because the energy level is different, how does that play with them, the more quiet, straightforward approach?
Well, I think that it's really interesting because lawyers, we're all human beings. We all present things in our natural inclinations. Some of us are more like Alan Jackson. Some of us are more quiet like Adam Lally. I don't think one is always necessarily better over the other. They're just different. The Commonwealth in this case, the way I see Prosecutor Lally is he's a little bit more methodical, and it might be not as exciting to watch, but I do think he's attempting to lay the foundation throughout for the jury to rely on. But I will say it's probably a bit more enjoyable to watch the defense because of, Alan Jackson is a showman, and he's clearly a good attorney.
And maybe that doesn't play. Maybe you think he's too slick, or he's too, whatever word you want to use. That's why I say maybe it plays like you said, maybe it doesn't. It will be interesting.
It can really play both ways, because ultimately the jury is made up of all different kinds of people, and some people might favor the quiet types and some people might favor the other. And at the end of the trial, they're all going to go into a room and battle that out together about which one was more effective at the end of the day.
Incredible. And again, we're only on day 3. Catherine, don't go anywhere.
I won't.
We're going to have you back a little later in the half hour. But first, we want to go over the timeline of events that are being put under a microscope. Our courtroom insider, Sue O'Connell, talks about what's happening during testimony that our cameras can't capture. Stay with us. Canton Confidential is back in just a moment. Well, since day one, Sue O'Connell has been our eyes and ears inside the courtroom. Obviously, she's joining us now. You've been able to see people's reaction, their body language, which tells so much about how we're feeling. And it's an angle that we don't get with the courtroom camera. So did you notice anything today, or did anything stand out?
Yeah, the jurors are getting into the groove of what's happening. Some of these, I'm sure these folks, it's the first time they've had jury duty, and they're, you're upset, you're concerned, you want to behave correctly. It's very important. But now that we're getting into the swing of things, I can see them relaxing a little bit. One of them told one of the court officers that they had to use the restroom today, and the judge used that as an opportunity to take a recess. So my favorite part today was the judge at a sidebar said, you can all take a moment to stand up and stretch if you want. And they almost did like they were being instructed. So there's definitely a rhythm that's now happening. And there's a little bit more, I think, just getting with the flow for the jurors.
That's a good point, that there's a lot of people they haven't served before, and this is not just any jury. Let's talk about Karen Reed. You have eyes on her. You can see her. There was new testimony today specifically about what she had to say on the scene when paramedics, first responders first got there. Did she physically respond in any way to hearing somebody testify? She said, I hit him.
I'll tell you, JC, that from the beginning, from the jury selection day one, if you didn't know who Karen Reed was in that courtroom, you would think that she was part of the defense team. She is not, and I haven't covered a lot of trials, but I've seen a lot of trials. Usually defendants aren't really active in their defense. She is conferring with the other defense lawyers. She is talking with them about what should happen. She's taking notes.
She's sitting in between them?
Yeah, she's sitting right in the middle of the table. And when there's a sidebar that she's not participating in, they are kind of, with body language, signaling to her something, and she's signaling back to them. So the emotion of this, and I think she said earlier in the week that she's seen the tape so many times, it's not really impacting her the way it might on the first look. But she's very professional at the table and very professionally detached from what's happening up on the stand.
That's so unusual to me. And I know it's been 2 years, but still you have somebody under oath swearing to what they think you said, which would convict her. If she said, well, it would help, with the case, saying I hit her. So to still stay so stoic is...
Yes, or she's communicating, none of this happened, and I have complete confidence in my defense. So it's really interesting to watch this unfold.
Sue, we know you'll be there for us each and every day.
Indeed.
You can't get rid of us. We're here. All right, coming up, you can get your questions about the trial answered right here on NBC 10, and we'll tell you how, so stay with us. Welcome back. Today's witnesses face questions about the morning John O'Keefe's body was found in the snow, what they saw and what they heard. But let's take a look at some of the facts of that timeline. A tragic end to a night out in Canton, and it all played out in less than 12 hours. Here's a quick timeline. Around 9 p.m. on January 28th, Karen Reed and John O'Keefe meet at C.F. McCarthy's in downtown Canton. They later stopped at the Waterfall Bar and Grill, where they're invited to the home of Boston police officer Brian Albert. When the bar closed, reports from that night indicate everyone headed to the Albert home about 2 miles away. According to court documents, Jennifer McCabe, Brian Albert's sister-in-law, says it was 12:15 in the morning when she saw Reed's car outside the home. Details of the next few hours are unclear, but what we do know is that at 6:04 a.m., a 911 call is made after O'Keefe's body is found in the front yard of the Albert home. First responders arrive within minutes. By 6:24, paramedics had moved O'Keefe to an ambulance to continue treatment. By now, a handful of officers had arrived at the scene. And just before 8 a.m., Boston police officer John O'Keefe was pronounced dead at Good Samaritan Hospital. Catherine Loftus is back with me now. Tomorrow, Catherine, jurors are going to do what's called the view, which means they get to sort of go on a, for lack of a better term, a field trip to go see all the locations that have been talked about and that we've heard about, including the 2 bars where they were prior, then the Canton home where the party was, where John O'Keefe was found. This all happened 2 years ago. There's no snow on the ground now. Things could have changed. Houses can get painted. What does the jury in a situation like this get out of doing it?
So the benefit of going on a view, and this often happens in really serious cases, mostly homicide cases, is that the jury is seeing and hearing testimony about what these scenes looked like. They're seeing, as we've seen over the past couple of days, evidence on a TV screen. It's never quite the same. As we all know, when we take a picture, it's not the same as what it looks like in person. So when the jurors are going, and they'll go with both the attorneys, the judge, the court officers, the clerk, they're able to say, oh, there's the flagpole, and his body was here, and the prosecutor's saying it's this far, but it looks maybe a little bit closer, or the defense is saying it is closer, and some jurors will say, actually, it's a little bit farther away. So it just gives the ability to contextualize what the scene actually looked like on the night of, even if there's no snow on the ground. We're all from New England. I think everybody can imagine what it was like.
Well, and to that point, it's hard to see in some of the video and the pictures exactly what we're looking at least on the smaller screen, because there was so much snow that night. So you're right. They get a really close-up view. Can they talk to each other to prosecute, or does the defense or prosecution get to speak at any time, or is this like a silent?
It's pretty much, there's a general layout of a description of what they're looking at, but just as if they were in the courtroom, it's really the same type of procedures. The judge actually set out a ruling about the media, about if any onlookers were coming. There's no interaction with the jury. They really want to maintain the same level of decorum as if you're in a courtroom. It's really just like taking it from the courtroom and putting it at the scene. So, no interacting, really just observing what the scene looks like.
In this case, real quickly, prosecution versus defense, does anybody have an advantage on something like this?
I don't think anybody really does, because ultimately the scene is the scene. They're interpreted in different ways, so I don't think it goes one way or the other. I think it helps all of the jurors, but I'm not sure that one has an advantage over the other.
I have to circle back to the TikTok, okay? Because you don't just post about this, but you are going to be covering the trial in your way.
I am.
And helping to explain. So as we're going forward, what are you hoping your role can be for all the tens of thousands of people who are following you?
Sure. So, really what I do, I've been streaming every day. I'm on TikTok, and I'm planning to expand to YouTube. But what I'm really doing is explaining things as we go, because it is confusing. It's difficult. It's hard to understand. Sometimes the things that make sense in the real world is not how the law is applied. It's not how the judge makes rulings. It's not how evidence is admitted. So my goal is to really just break it down so that people can understand and ultimately make their own decisions based on the evidence they hear instead of what they've, the outside.
I was just about to say, in this particular trial, I think it's so important to hear from people who are experts, because for 2 years we've had a very divisive groups about, speaking very loudly about how they feel about one side or another. I hope you'll come back.
I will.
Thank you
for
having
me. I appreciate it, JC.
Catherine Loftus, look her up on TikTok. But coming up, we just talked about how all of you are really getting drawn into this. Matter of fact, nationally, it's getting attention. It has thousands of people talking online. We want you to join the conversation with our team of experts. We'll explain how you can do that right after the break. Welcome back. We are staying on top of every aspect on this trial, both inside and outside the courthouse. And tonight we have an update on the court-ordered buffer zone put in place by Judge Beverly Cannoni. Earlier today, the Supreme Judicial Court released its opinion after upholding the judge's decision to keep demonstrators at least 200 feet away from the Norfolk County Superior Court during the Karen Read trial. Demonstrators appealed that decision, arguing that the buffer zone impacted their First Amendment right to protest. But according to the SJC judge, Judge Cannoni, quote, struck a balance between the right to protest or demonstrate and the defendant's right to a fair trial. Therefore, basically, the 200-foot buffer zone will continue. We will be back in court tomorrow morning for more testimony ahead of the jury's viewing of those important locations that we talked about. And then at 7 o'clock, we're going to have a complete breakdown of anything you may have missed, along with expert analysis. We mentioned it earlier in our show. We want you to join the conversation. If you have a question about the Karen Read trial for one of our experts, we want to hear it. Send us an email at canton.confidential@nbcuni.com. We may ask your question on the next edition of our show. We might get an expert so they can answer your question on the next edition of our show. We hope that you'll engage with us. Until then, I do hope you all have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.
A Boston police officer is dead. His girlfriend charged with murder. The prosecution says she hit him with her car and killed him, but the defense says she's the victim of a massive cover-up. Now, the trial is underway, and NBC 10 Boston is taking you inside the courtroom. See the evidence, hear from the witnesses, and get expert legal analysis as this saga unfolds. Canton Confidential, the Karen Read murder trial. Continuing coverage, streaming on NBC Boston News Channel.